Imagine boarding a plane and discovering your captain is drunk. Not tipsy, not slightly buzzed, absolutely hammered. Now imagine he's piloting a massive commercial airliner with 297 people on board, and he's about to attempt one of the most dangerous landings in Pakistan. Keep watching and find out what happened next. 2015. Karachi's Jinnah International Airport. It's a typical humid evening in Pakistan's largest city. Flight 142 is preparing for what should be a routine one-hour hop to Islamabad. Nothing fancy. A milk run that Shaheen Air had been flying for years. The Airbus A330 sits on the tarmac. A workhorse of modern aviation. 297 passengers are settling into their seats. Some are business people heading to meetings in the capital. Others are families visiting relatives. A few tourists mixed in. Nobody suspects what's about to unfold. Up in the cockpit, Captain Hashmi takes his seat. He's the pilot in command tonight. 47 years old. Thousands of flight hours under his belt. On paper, he's exactly who you'd want flying your plane. Experienced. Qualified. Trusted by the airline to handle their most expensive aircraft. But tonight, Captain Hashmi has a problem. Actually, he is the problem. Because Captain Hashmi is drunk. Not just over the limit. Visibly, obviously, dangerously intoxicated. His first officer notices immediately. You can't hide that level of impairment in a confined cockpit. The slurred speech. The unfocused eyes. The smell of alcohol permeating the flight deck. But here's where it gets interesting. In many countries, what happened next would be simple. The first officer would refuse to fly. Ground crew would intervene. The flight would be canceled. But this is Pakistan in 2015, and the aviation culture there is different. Hierarchy matters. A lot. Challenging a senior captain isn't just uncomfortable. It can end your career. So the first officer faces an impossible choice. Speak up and potentially lose his job. Or stay silent and hope for the best. He chooses silence. The worst kind of silence. Flight 142 pushes back from the gate right on schedule. 7:30 p.m. local time. The A330's engines spool up. That distinctive whine of modern turbofans preparing for takeoff. Ground control clears them for departure. Passengers are reading magazines, checking phones one last time before switching to airplane mode. Settling in for the short flight north. Nobody in the cabin has any idea what's happening up front. The takeoff is surprisingly smooth. Muscle memory is a powerful thing. Captain Hashmi has flown this route hundreds of times. His hands know the controls even when his brain is swimming in alcohol. Flaps retracted. Climbing through 10,000 feet. So far, so good. Maybe the first officer is breathing a tiny sigh of relief. Maybe this will work out. Maybe they'll make it to Islamabad without incident. But alcohol doesn't care about maybe. 37,000 feet. Up here, the air is thin and cold. -60 degrees outside. But inside the pressurized cabin, passengers are comfortable. Flight attendants begin the beverage service. The routine hum of a domestic flight. An hour from now, they'll be on the ground in Islamabad. An hour from now, this will all be over. Except it won't. Because now Captain Hashmi has another problem. He needs to use the bathroom. Not unusual. Pilots are human. They have the same biological needs as everyone else. But here's the thing about being blackout drunk at 37,000 feet in command of a commercial airliner. Your judgment is impaired. Your coordination is shot, and your ability to handle unexpected situations is basically zero. Captain Hashmi unbuckles and leaves the cockpit. The first officer is now alone on the flight deck. Finally, a moment to think. A moment to consider what he should do. But those moments pass. The captain returns, sits back down, and things start to deteriorate rapidly. The approach to Islamabad is where everything goes sideways. Islamabad International Airport, the old one operational in 2015, sits in a valley surrounded by the Margala Hills. It's not the most dangerous airport in Pakistan. That honor belongs to places like Gilgit. But it's not a walk in the park either. You need to be sharp, focused. Sober would be nice. Captain Hashmi is none of these things. Air traffic control begins vectoring Flight 142 for the approach. Standard radio calls. Expected responses. The captain's responses are off. Delayed, confused. Radio communications from the cockpit sound wrong. Anyone who spent time around intoxicated people knows that sound. The slight slur, the overcompensation, the trying too hard to sound normal, that actually makes you sound less normal. The controller becomes concerned. This isn't right. This isn't how a professional flight crew should sound. He makes a decision. A gutsy one. He orders Flight 142 to enter a holding pattern. This directive should be simple. Holding patterns are basic stuff. Student pilots practice them. You fly to a fix, make some timed turns, and maintain altitude. Flying 101. But Captain Hashmi can't do it. He's too impaired. The aircraft starts deviating from the assigned pattern. Altitude fluctuations. Heading errors. The kind of flying that would fail a check ride. Offering suggestions. Gently correcting. But he's not taking over. He should be taking over. Any reasonable person would take over. But that's the insidious thing about hierarchical cockpit culture. It makes unreasonable decisions seem reasonable. It makes fatal choices seem like the path of least resistance. They can hear the confusion in the radio calls. Something is very wrong with Shaheen Air 142. But they don't know what. They don't know about the drunk captain. They just know this aircraft is not being flown properly. Here's where the story takes a turn that sounds made up. I promise you it's not. Captain Hashmi, in his drunken state, decides he needs to use the bathroom again, so he gets up. While air traffic control is giving them vectors, while the first officer is barely managing to keep the aircraft stable, some notice he looks unwell. Others think maybe he's just tired. Nobody suspects the truth. Nobody thinks their captain might be drunk, because that's impossible. That doesn't happen. Pilots don't fly drunk, except when they do. When Captain Hashmi returns to the cockpit, things get worse. Much worse. He's now arguing with the first officer. Raised voices on the flight deck. The cockpit voice recorder, that black box that survives crashes to tell investigators what happened, is capturing every word, every slurred syllable, every moment of this disaster, unfolding in real time. They need Flight 142 to either land or divert. The aircraft can't hold forever. Fuel is finite. Alternatives are limited. They clear the flight for approach. Runway 30. The first officer acknowledges. Maybe he's hoping the approach will wake Captain Hashmi up. Maybe he's hoping muscle memory will kick in. Maybe he's just praying. Prayer doesn't fly airplanes. The approach is a catastrophe. The A330 is all over the sky. Too high, then too low. Too fast, then too slow. The instruments are screaming at them. The ground proximity warning system, that computer that yells at pilots when they're about to hit terrain, starts alerting. Terrain, 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 pull up. That artificial voice that has saved countless lives. The voice that means you are seconds from death. In a normal cockpit, this triggers an immediate response. Both pilots react, full power. Pitch up. Execute the go-around. Get away from the ground. Figure out what went wrong and try again. But this isn't a normal cockpit. Captain Hashmi, drunk and belligerent, doesn't want to go around. He wants to land. He's convinced he can salvage this approach. The first officer finally takes action. He pushes the throttles forward, pulling the aircraft away from the ground, against the captain's wishes. Against the chain of command. Against everything he's been taught about respecting seniority. But in favor of not dying. That seems like a worthwhile trade. The A330 climbs away, crisis averted. For now, but the flight isn't over. They still need to land. Fuel is getting low. Air traffic control is demanding explanations. Captain Hashmi is not taking this well. He's angry, humiliated, drunk. A dangerous combination at any time, but especially dangerous at altitude in command of an aircraft. The controller asks directly about the captain's condition. Are you fit to fly? Can you continue? These questions should have simple answers. But Captain Hashmi's response is garbled. Nonsensical. The controller has heard enough. He makes a decision that probably saved 297 lives. He refuses to clear Flight 142 for another approach attempt. Not until the situation is resolved. Not until he understands what's happening. The aircraft continues holding, burning fuel. going nowhere. In the cabin, passengers are getting nervous. This isn't normal. Flights don't circle airports for this long. The delay announcements from the flight attendants are vague. Technical issues. Nothing to worry about. Everything under control. Except nothing is under control. The airline's operations center gets involved. Radio calls to the cockpit. What's happening up there? Why aren't you landing? No longer able to maintain the charade. Admits the truth. The captain is incapacitated. He doesn't say drunk, not yet. But the implication is clear. The pilot in command cannot fly the aircraft. There's a moment of stunned silence on the radio, then controlled chaos. The airline scrambles. They need to get this plane on the ground. They need to get it on the ground now. But they also need to do it safely. Landing an A330 isn't like parking a car. It requires skill, concentration, sobriety. The solution they arrive at is both pragmatic and damning. The first officer will land the aircraft. He's qualified. He's sober. He can do this. But this means officially acknowledging what everyone now knows. The captain is unfit. The captain is drunk. The captain has endangered nearly 300 lives. The first officer lines up for another approach. This time, Captain Hashmi doesn't interfere. Maybe he's passed out. Maybe he's given up. Maybe some tiny sober part of his brain realizes he's done enough damage. The approach is stable. Professional. Everything the previous attempts were not. The A330 crosses the threshold. Touches down. Deploys thrust reversers. Rolls out. Parks at the gate. 2 hours late. But everyone is alive. As passengers disembark, they have no idea what just happened. They're annoyed about the delay. Frustrated about missed connections. Completely unaware they just survived one of the most egregious cases of pilot impairment in aviation history. The truth will come out. But not tonight. Tonight, they just want to get to their hotels and forget about the weird, delayed flight from Karachi. But the aviation authorities don't forget. Can't forget. The investigation begins immediately. The flight data recorder is analyzed. Witness statements are taken. And the evidence is overwhelming. Captain Hashmi was drunk. Obviously criminally drunk. Blood alcohol tests confirm it. His level was more than 3 times the legal limit for pilots. 3 times. That's not a couple of drinks. That's a bender. That's blackout territory. The backlash is swift. Captain Hashmi's license is revoked. He faces criminal charges. Shaheen Air is fined and investigated. Questions arise about their safety culture. How did this happen? How did a drunk captain make it onto a flight deck? Where were the checks? The safeguards? The people who should have said no? The answers are uncomfortable. Shaheen Air, like many airlines in developing countries, had a culture problem. Cost-cutting was prioritized over safety. Maintenance was deferred. Training was minimal. And senior captains were treated like gods. Untouchable. Unquestionable. Even when they showed up to work drunk. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of systemic failure. And Flight 142 was a warning. A warning that went unheeded. Because here's the kicker. Shaheen Air continued operating, made their promises, said all the right things about safety and accountability, and then went right back to business as usual, when they finally collapsed. Not because of safety concerns, though those were abundant, but because of financial mismanagement. They owed money to airports, to fuel suppliers, to their own employees. The airline that let a drunk pilot fly simply ran out of cash and shut down. Their fleet was grounded. Their license was suspended. And that was the end of Shaheen Air. But the lessons of Flight 142 live on, or they should. Because the factors that nearly caused this disaster exist in aviation cultures around the world. The hierarchical cockpit. The reluctance to speak up. The normalization of deviance. The assumption that experienced pilots can't possibly screw up. All of these are still there. Still dangerous. Still killing people. Modern aviation is extraordinarily safe. You're more likely to die driving to the airport than flying on a plane. But that safety is built on learning from failures, from accidents and incidents and near misses. Every regulation is written in blood. Every procedure exists because someone died when it didn't exist. Flight 142 should have been a catastrophic accident. It should have been headlines around the world. 297 dead. Drunk pilot. Preventable tragedy. Instead, it was a wake-up call. A near miss that exposed serious problems. The first officer from that flight never flew for Shaheen Air again. Smart move. He was praised by some for eventually taking control, criticized by others for not acting sooner. Both perspectives are valid. He was in an impossible situation, a situation that never should have existed, a situation created by systemic failures far above his pay grade. Captain Hashmi's story after the incident is less clear. Some reports say he faced jail time. Others say he simply disappeared from aviation. Either way, his career was over. As it should be. There's no coming back from flying drunk. There's no second chance when you endanger hundreds of lives. And those 297 passengers, most of them never knew how close they came. How many times that night they were seconds from disaster. How a combination of luck and a first officer's eventual courage kept them alive. They went home, complained about the delay, moved on with their lives, unaware they just survived something that should never happen. That's the thing about aviation safety. When it works, it's invisible. Passengers board, planes fly, everyone lands safely. The thousands of decisions and procedures and safeguards that make it work are completely transparent. It's only when something goes wrong that we see the system. And Flight 142 showed us a system with serious cracks. The global aviation community studied this incident. The International Civil Aviation Organization issued recommendations. Airlines worldwide reviewed their policies on pilot fitness for duty. Random alcohol testing became more common. The culture began to shift. Slowly. But it shifted. Today, if a pilot shows up drunk, they're much more likely to be stopped before they reach the cockpit. Ground crew are trained to spot impairment. First officers are empowered to refuse to fly. The chain of command, while still important, no longer trumps safety, at least in theory. In practice, it depends on the airline, on the country, on the individuals involved. The sad truth is that Flight 142 wasn't the first time a drunk pilot endangered lives. And it won't be the last. Pilots have been arrested for flying under the influence. In developed countries with strong safety cultures. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. So what's the takeaway here? What's the lesson from Shaheen Air Flight 142? It's simple and complicated at the same time. Safety culture matters. Having rules isn't enough. Enforcing them matters. Creating an environment where people can speak up without fear matters. Treating pilots as fallible humans rather than infallible gods matters. And most importantly, never assuming that something can't happen just because it shouldn't. Because November 3, 2015 proved that it can. He did endanger 297 lives. And he almost got away with it. Almost. The only thing standing between Flight 142 and disaster was one first officer's eventual decision to act, one air traffic controller's suspicion, and a whole lot of luck. That's not a safety system. That's a prayer, and prayers don't fly airplanes. People do. Sober, qualified, competent people. That's the standard. That's what passengers deserve. And that's what Shaheen Air Flight 142 failed to provide. Thanks for watching.